We're back on Politics Nation with the pivotal decision handed down by the Supreme Court today, striking down most of Arizona's harsh anti-immigrant law. The decision comes 2 years after Arizona officials rushed SB 1070 into law, claiming the state had as much right to enforce immigration laws as the federal government.
We have state laws that I enforce. The federal government should be thanking me and everybody else in Arizona for doing their job, working with them, instead of filing lawsuits to try to do everything they can to stop this illegal immigration law enforcement.
The United States is violating Arizona's 10th Amendment rights.
Arizona did not ask for this fight with the federal government to secure our border and to enforce our immigration laws. We did not want this fight. We did not start this fight.
The Supreme Court ended that fight today. The court knocked down provisions requiring all immigrants to carry documentation, making it a crime for undocumented immigrants to apply for jobs, and allowing officers to arrest suspected illegal immigrants without warrants. This is a significant victory for the federal government and the president. And it was a huge setback for those on the right who have tried to push their radical agenda under the guise of states' rights. But the court allowed the most controversial part of the law to stand. The so-called Papers, Please section requires police to check the immigration status of detained people who they suspect are in the country illegally. And although Democrats worried this portion of the law could lead to racial profiling, they're not losing sight of today's partial victory. The president said, quote, "I am pleased the Supreme Court has struck down key provisions of Arizona's immigration law. A patchwork of state laws is not a solution to our broken immigration system. It's part of the problem." Joining me now is Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, a Democrat from California, and Telemundo anchor Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Hello, Reverend. Hello, Jose. How are you?
Fine. Congresswoman, let me start with you. What's your reaction to the ruling today?
Well, for the most part, it upholds what many of us have been saying, and that is that we shouldn't have to carry around national ID, that it's wrong to stop somebody with sort of a profiling instance to try to deport them. So to a large extent, I think the ruling is pretty good.
Now, Jose, the governor of Arizona claimed a victory. Yet some feel that she's trying to save face. Clearly, those that had rallied around SB 1070 as a states' rights were defeated. But it does leave the door open for possible racial profiling. Is that not right?
Well, it's certainly a possibility, Reverend. And let me just tell you something. I don't think we can minimize what 2B, Section 2B, really represents for 380,000 undocumented immigrants that live and make Arizona their home. Many have children there, have roots there, have established homes, and have participated in the local schools and their communities, and have been an integral part of that society for many years. We're talking about 380,000 people who right now are being told that as of today, officers have the legal right to, if you're stopped because you're going 5 miles over the speed limit or you have a busted tail light, that they can ask for your papers. And if you don't have an opportunity to show and prove that you are legal, you are on your way out. That we cannot minimize. And you know what? It's important to talk about the political ramifications of this, but let's remember that what happens in Arizona could very well also be what was going to happen in Alabama and in Georgia and in Utah and in so many other states that are looking at 1070 and looking at what the Supreme Court says about 1070 and deciding how to kind of tailor make their laws to be within the boundaries of what the Supreme Court says is legal.
No, I think that's clearly right, because Congresswoman, many of us that protested, I among them, 1070 in Arizona, was concerned about the racial profiling.
I appreciate you went out and you said that it was wrong. I want to remind people that for a while we have had programs at the federal level that say that if you are stopped for something else and taken in to be booked in local jails, that we usually have an immigration agent there, a part of the federal government, that does take a look at whether you are here with the right paperwork or not. So that piece has existed. What was really scary about Arizona was that people could be stopped at any point.
Right.
People who, I don't sometimes carry around identification that would prove that I'm an American citizen. And more importantly, what we have seen from some people in Arizona who are in law enforcement is that they purposely target people who look, if you will, Mexican. And they know they don't have paperwork on them. I mean, again, people don't necessarily carry around it. We don't have a national ID card. It's part of really what it is to be American. And they have taken them and they have deported them. In some cases, people who have been deported have been legal residents. They've been citizens. So the scariest pieces of that law have been deemed unconstitutional. But it still says to what extent and how minor is somebody going to be looking at your tail light broken, etc.? What is the minor offense that some of these overzealous people will do to stop you, say that they're doing a legitimate stop, and at the same time target you for papers, target you for deportation? That is still a scary piece.
Now, Jose, let me ask you this. I was a little taken aback by Justice Scalia. He issued really what ended up being a scathing dissent. And he hammered away at the president of the United States on his immigration policy. He says if securing its territory in this fashion is not within the power of Arizona, we should cease referring to it as a sovereign state. Very strong language. Then he goes on to say, the president said at a news conference that the new program is the right thing to do in light of Congress' failure to pass the administration's proposed revision of the Immigration Act. Perhaps it is, though Arizona may not think so. But to say, as the court does, that Arizona contradicts federal law by enforcing applications of the Immigration Act that the president declines to enforce boggles the mind, which is really startling, because he's addressing things that have nothing to do with the decision. I mean, it's almost unheard of for a Supreme Court justice in a dissent to go after a president, a sitting president of the United States by name, as well as the fact that he says that we should cease referring to Arizona as a sovereign state if this is the case. Real strong language.
Yeah, I agree, Reverend, and I've got to tell you, I'm not an attorney, but I've got to tell you, I don't recall in recent years when the Supreme Court uses their statements on law to include political statements of one stripe or the other. I will say this, Reverend, separate from the issue of what the magistrate said, I think that the lack of political will in Washington by both Republicans and Democrats to put forth a serious proposal on immigration reform, one that could be bipartisan, one that could be at least discussed in an open manner without using harsh language. The lack of leadership that vacuum that has existed for many years now in Washington, D.C. is what permits the SB 1070s of the world to arise. It's what permits the HB 56s of the world to arrive. And if Democrats and Republicans and the Congresswoman that you have on your show tonight is a perfect example of someone who is willing to reach across the aisle to talk to Republicans and to try to get something done on immigration reform. But unfortunately, these people are in the minority, both in the Republican and the Democratic Party. You know why? Because when they could do it, they didn't do it. And the Republicans have been stonewalling this issue for many years.
Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez and Jose Diaz-Balart, I've got to go. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's been bullied, mocked, and abused. And tonight, bus monitor Karen Klein is here live to tell us how she's doing and what she makes of the apologies from some of the boys who bullied her.